Picture this. It's past midnight on July 17th, 1918. In a basement in Ekaterinburg, a family of 7 stands together in what they believe is temporary safety. The father, once the most powerful man on earth, gently holds his sick son. The mother clutches her daughters close. They're told they're being moved for their protection. Then, 11 armed men walk into the room. What happens next will haunt history forever. In just 11 minutes, 3 centuries of royal dynasty will be erased in chaos and blood. But here's what will shock you most. The man who ordered this execution had no idea he was killing someone who, even in his final breath, believed God himself had chosen him to rule over 130 million people. This isn't just another story about the fall of kings. This is the story of how love became a weapon, how a sick child doomed an empire, and how a man who never wanted power lost everything because of it. You think you know about the Russian Revolution. You think you understand what really happened to the last Tsar. You're about to discover that everything you thought you knew is only the beginning. Because Nicholas Romanov's death didn't start with revolution. It started with a mother's desperate love, a mystical healer, and a secret that would bring down the mightiest empire on earth. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change how you see power, family, and the price of absolute rule. Let me take you back to 1894. Nicholas Romanov is 26 years old, collecting stamps and dreaming of a quiet life with his beloved Alexandra. He's second in line to the throne, safe, he thinks, from the burden of ruling. His father, Alexander III, is a giant of a man, seemingly indestructible. Then, on a crisp October morning, everything changes. Alexander collapses. Within hours, he's dead. Suddenly, Nicholas finds himself Emperor of Russia, ruler of the largest country on earth, spanning 11 time zones, controlling more land than any human being in history. And he's absolutely terrified. "I'm not prepared to be a czar," he whispers to his cousin, tears streaming down his face. "I never wanted to become one. I know nothing of the business of ruling." But there's no choice. The crown doesn't wait for readiness.
Nicholas immediately marries his sweetheart, Alexandra, a German princess with golden hair and deep blue eyes. Their love is genuine, passionate, real, a rare thing among royal marriages. Soon they're blessed with 4 beautiful daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. The girls fill the palace with laughter, their father with joy. But empires aren't built on love and laughter. They need sons, heirs, and for 10 agonizing years, Nicholas and Alexandra pray for a boy. Finally, in 1904, their prayers are answered. Alexei is born, the future Tsar, the hope of the dynasty. The celebration lasts for days. Church bells ring across the empire. The Romanov line is secure. Or so they think. 6 weeks later, they discover their beautiful son carries a deadly secret in his blood: hemophilia, the royal disease that turns the slightest injury into a potential death sentence. A bump, a fall, even vigorous play can trigger internal bleeding that no doctor can stop. Watch Alexandra as she sits by her son's bedside during his first bleeding crisis. For 3 days and nights, she doesn't sleep, doesn't eat. She just prays, watching her baby writhe in agony as blood pools in his joints. The imperial doctors stand helplessly by, their modern medicine useless against this ancient curse. This is when desperation walks through the palace doors, wearing the robes of a peasant monk named Rasputin. Grigory Rasputin is everything the royal court despises. Unwashed, crude, a peasant who speaks to God as if they're old drinking companions. His eyes are hypnotic, his presence magnetic, his reputation scandalous. He claims to have healing powers. When Alexander falls into another bleeding crisis, when the doctors declare him dying, when Alexandra has exhausted every prayer she knows, Rasputin is summoned. What happens next changes everything. The monk enters the boy's room, kneels beside the bed, and begins to pray. Hours pass. Slowly, impossibly, the bleeding stops. Alexei opens his eyes, asks for water, tries to smile. Is it a miracle? Is it coincidence? Is it something darker? Alexandra doesn't care. Her son is alive, and in her mind, God has sent her a holy man to protect the future Tsar. But here's what she doesn't understand. Every favor comes with a price. Every miracle comes with a bill. And Rasputin's bill will bankrupt an empire.
The monk doesn't just heal Alexei, he begins advising the Empress on everything: who should be appointed to government positions, how the war should be fought, even matters of foreign policy. This illiterate peasant starts making decisions that affect millions of lives. The Empress listens only to that devil, complains one minister after another is dismissed on Rasputin's recommendation. She believes his prayers keep the boy alive, so she believes everything he says. The Russian nobility watches in horror as their empire is guided by what they see as a madman. Rumors spread like wildfire. Rasputin is a German spy. Rasputin is sleeping with the Empress. Rasputin is the real ruler of Russia. But Nicholas can't dismiss him. Every time he tries, Alexei falls ill again. The choice becomes impossible: his son's life or his empire's stability. He chooses his son. It will cost him everything. By 1905, the Russian Empire is a powder keg waiting for a spark. The military has been humiliated by Japan, tiny Japan defeating mighty Russia. The economy is in ruins. The people are starving while the nobles feast. The spark comes on January 9th, 1905, Bloody Sunday. Picture this scene. Thousands of workers, led by a priest named Father Gapon, march through the snow toward the Winter Palace. They carry icons, portraits of the Tsar, petitions for better working conditions. They believe their little father Nicholas will hear their pleas, will help his suffering children. They're wrong. Palace guards open fire on the unarmed crowd. Bodies fall into the red snow. Children scream for their parents. Over 1,000 people die in minutes. The people have lost faith in me, Nicholas writes in his diary that night, but he still doesn't understand. The sacred bond between Tsar and people, built over centuries, has been shattered forever. Revolution explodes across the empire. Workers strike in every major city. Peasants burn manor houses. Naval crews mutiny. Even Nicholas's own guards begin questioning orders. The 1905 revolution forces Nicholas to accept constitutional monarchy, sharing power with an elected parliament called the Duma. For a man who believed God appointed him absolute ruler, this feels like abandoning his sacred duty. I have a constitution in my head, but my heart remains autocratic, he tells his ministers. This contradiction between what Nicholas promises and what he believes will poison everything that follows. Then comes the event that seals his fate, World War I. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated in Sarajevo, Nicholas faces the choice that will destroy his family, his dynasty, his empire. His generals demand mobilization to support Serbia. His wife begs him to stay out of European conflicts. His people, still recovering from the Japanese defeat, can't afford another war. Nicholas signs the mobilization order anyway. I foresee that all of us will pay dearly for this war, Alexandra writes to her sister. She has no idea how prophetic these words will prove. The war begins with patriotic fervor. Russian armies march into East Prussia singing hymns, confident of quick victory. Instead, they walk into a slaughter at Tannenberg. Over 100,000 Russian soldiers die or are captured in a single battle. General Samsonov, commanding the Second Army, shoots himself rather than survive the catastrophe. But this is just the beginning. In 1915, Nicholas makes the decision that dooms his dynasty. He will personally command the armies, leaving Alexandra to govern in his absence. The Tsar, who never wanted to rule, now tries to be a general, while the German-born Empress tries to be an autocrat. Both fail spectacularly. With Nicholas at the front commanding disasters, Alexandra rules through Rasputin's influence. Every military defeat,
Every food shortage, every administrative failure gets blamed on the German woman and her holy devil. The rumors grow more poisonous by the day. People whisper that Alexandra signals German submarines, that Rasputin passes military secrets to Berlin, that the imperial family is actively sabotaging the war effort. None of it's true, but truth matters less than perception when people are dying by the millions. The army that began the war with patriotic songs now marches barefoot through Polish mud. Soldiers share rifles because factories can't produce enough weapons. Hospitals overflow with wounded men who receive no medical care because supplies have vanished into bureaucratic chaos. "We have no ammunition, no boots, no hope," reports General Brusilov after his offensive collapses. The men fight bravely, but they cannot fight the impossible. By 1916, Russia has lost over 4 million soldiers. Refugees flood the cities. Bread lines stretch for blocks, while the wealthy still dine on French delicacies. The contrast becomes unbearable. December 30th, 1916. Prince Felix Yusupov and fellow conspirators decide they can save the monarchy by killing its greatest liability, Rasputin. They invite him to Yusupov's palace for what they claim is a private party, but instead of celebration, they offer poisoned cakes and wine. When the poison fails to work, they shoot him. When shooting fails to kill him, they beat him with clubs. Finally, they throw his body into the icy Never River. But killing Rasputin only removes the scapegoat while changing nothing about Russia's fundamental problems. "They have killed our friend," Alexandra telegraphs Nicholas at the front. "I am horrified, shaken. Come quickly." Nicholas returns to find his wife devastated and his empire collapsing. Rasputin's death has eliminated the convenient target for popular anger, forcing people to look elsewhere for explanations of their suffering. They find those explanations in the Tsar himself. February 1917. It starts with women queuing for bread in Petrograd, complaining about their hungry children. Workers join them in the streets. Students add their voices to the growing chorus of anger. "Give us bread" becomes "down with the Tsar." Nicholas orders troops to fire on protesters, but something unprecedented happens. The soldiers refuse. The Pavlovsky regiment mutinies first, then the Volinsky, then entire divisions. The Tsar's authority simply evaporates. "The situation in Petrograd is anarchical," reports General Habalov. "I am powerless to restore order." Nicholas tries to return to his capital, but railway workers block his train. Revolutionary committees control the stations. The emperor of all the Russians can't reach his own palace. "There is no one devoted to me except my family," Nicholas writes, as his generals, ministers, and even his own relatives demand abdication. The man who believed in divine appointment discovers that God's will apparently requires popular consent. On March 15, 1917, in a railway car outside Pskov, Nicholas II signs away 3 centuries of Romanov rule with a few pen strokes. The man who never wanted to be Tsar is no longer one. The provisional government promises safe passage to England for the former imperial family. King George V, Nicholas's cousin, initially agrees to provide asylum. Then politics intervenes. Under pressure from his government, which fears harboring Russian royalty might inspire British revolutionaries, King George withdraws his offer. The cousin who could have saved the Romanovs instead condemns them to remain in revolutionary Russia. By October 1917, Lenin's Bolsheviks have seized power. The new regime views Nicholas not as a defeated opponent, but as a continuing threat. While white and red armies fight across Russia's vastness, the former Tsar remains a potential rallying point for counter-revolution. The Bolsheviks move the Romanovs to Ekaterinburg, supposedly to prevent white forces from rescuing them. The Ipatiev house becomes their prison, euphemistically called the House of Special Purpose. Yakov Yurovsky, the new commandant, brings revolutionary discipline to the house. Guards are forbidden to fraternize with prisoners. Windows are painted over to prevent signaling. The family's movements are restricted to a few rooms. The atmospheric pressure is increasing, Nicholas notes in his diary. He's learned to read political weather, though too late to save himself.
By July 18, 1918, white forces are approaching Ekaterinburg. Moscow faces a terrible choice. If the whites rescue Nicholas, he could become the symbol of counter-revolution. The solution arrives in a coded telegram from Moscow. The entire family is to be eliminated. No witnesses, no survivors, no possibility of future claims to the throne. July 17, 1918, the family follows their normal routine, unaware it's their last day alive. Nicholas reads from the book of Job during evening prayers. Alexandra works on her embroidery. The children play quietly, as they've learned to do in captivity. At 12:30 a.m., guards knock on their doors. "Please wake up. We need to move you for your safety. Czechoslovak forces are approaching the city. You must be evacuated immediately." The family dresses quickly, gathering a few possessions. Nicholas carries Alexei, who's too weak to walk after a recent bleeding episode. They descend to the basement, expecting to find transportation waiting. Instead, they find an empty room. "Please wait here while we arrange the automobiles," Yurovsky tells them. The family stands together, confused, but not yet alarmed. Then Yurovsky returns, with 11 men carrying revolvers. "By decision of the Ural Regional Soviet, you are to be shot," he announces, reading from an official document. Nicholas, finally understanding, steps protectively in front of his family. What, he asks, the last words of the last Tsar.
What follows is chaos, not execution. Hidden jewels sewn into the daughters' corsets deflect bullets, creating confusion in the smoky basement. Guards fire wildly, unable to see clearly, hitting walls and each other as often as their targets. Alexandra dies quickly, shot through the head while trying to make the sign of the cross. Olga and Tatiana fall beside their father, but Anastasia and Maria, protected by their jewelry-lined clothing, survive the initial volley. The sound is deafening in the confined space. 11 men firing dozens of shots while screaming orders over the chaos. Some family members survive long enough to crawl toward the door before bayonets finish what bullets started. 11 minutes of horror end 3 centuries of dynasty. Disposing of the bodies proves more difficult than killing them. Yurovsky's men drive to abandoned mines outside Ekaterinburg, trying to destroy evidence of their crime. They pour sulfuric acid over the remains, hoping chemistry will accomplish what flames cannot. When this proves insufficient, they bury the family in 2 separate graves, hoping to confuse future investigators. The cover-up begins immediately. Soviet newspapers announce that Nicholas has been executed, but claim his family has been evacuated to a safe location. For decades, the world wonders what happened to Alexandra, Alexei, and the 4 daughters. This uncertainty serves Soviet purposes perfectly. Living Romanovs might inspire rescue attempts. Dead Romanovs would become martyrs, but missing Romanovs gradually fade from international consciousness. For 70 years, the Romanov graves remain hidden. The Soviet government builds a city park over the burial site, where children play while their parents walk unknowingly above the remains of the last imperial family. But secrets buried in Russian earth have a way of surfacing. In 1991, as the Soviet Union collapses, local investigators reveal the secret they've guarded for decades. Geologist Alexander Avdenin had actually found the grave in 1979, but kept silent until political change made disclosure safe. DNA testing confirms the identity of Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 daughters, but Alexei and 1 daughter remain missing. The family that died together is still separated in death. In 2007, archaeologists find the missing remains near the original burial site. Finally, after nearly a century, the entire Romanov family is accounted for. The Russian Orthodox Church canonizes the family in 2000 as passion bearers.
a special category of martyrs who face suffering with faith and forgiveness. Their icons now hang in churches across Russia, transforming a failed monarch into a religious symbol. Today, visitors to St. Petersburg can tour the Winter Palace where Nicholas once lived, now a museum to imperial grandeur. In Ekaterinburg, a church stands where the Ipatier house once imprisoned the family. These sites remind us that power is temporary, but the human stories within historical events echo through generations.
The gunshots in that Ekaterinburg basement didn't just end lives. They ended an era when men claimed to rule by divine right over millions who had never consented to their authority. Nicholas's death teaches us that crowns are heavier than gold. Born into privilege, but trapped by duty, he loved his family, but failed his people. His tragedy wasn't just personal, but historical. The collision between ancient autocracy and modern democracy. The last Tsar died believing God had chosen him to rule. His executioners believed the people had chosen revolution. In the end, both were swept away by forces larger than individual will or divine mandate. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from Nicholas's story is how powerless even the powerful become when the world decides to change. Empires that seem eternal can crumble in months. Dynasties that ruled for centuries can end in basement rooms. The crown that Nicholas never wanted to wear became the symbol of an empire that could not survive the modern world. His reluctant reign reminds us that leadership requires more than birthright or good intentions. It demands the wisdom to understand change and the courage to guide it. In our own age of rapid transformation, Nicholas II's fate offers both warning and wisdom. Those who wield power must earn legitimacy through service, not inherit it through blood. And those who seek change must remember that violence destroys more than it creates. The last emperor of Russia wanted only to protect his family and preserve his heritage. Instead, he lost both, teaching history that absolute power corrupts absolutely. But powerlessness in the face of history destroys everything, including innocence, hope, and life itself. The screams that echoed from that basement in 1918 still resonate today, reminding us that when empires fall, they fall completely, taking with them not just crowns and thrones, but the very people who wore them and the children who should have inherited them. This is the true tragedy of Nicholas II. Not that he was a bad man, but that he was an ordinary man thrust into extraordinary circumstances, carrying burdens no human being should bear, making choices no parent should face, and paying prices no family should pay. Remember his story, remember what it cost, and remember that power, no matter how absolute it seems, is always just 11 minutes away from ending forever.